At Sierra Valley Airport, the morning felt ordinary until the K9 dog, Hudson, suddenly broke from his patrol line and planted himself in front of a little girl holding a purple cat carrier. No one understood why he exploded into furious barking, loud enough to freeze the entire gate. Adults panicked, the child burst into tears, and Hudson refused to move an inch. Only seconds later would everyone learn the frightening reason behind his desperate warning. Morning at Sierra Valley International crept in on rubber wheels and overhead announcements. Sunlight spilled through the wide glass wall, painting long stripes across the polished floor. Hudson padded beside Officer Dana Brooks, his nails ticking softly, nose tasting the air. The K9 vest hugged his ribs, familiar weight against a body that was all coiled discipline and silent focus. To most people, he was just another working dog. To Dana, he was the one pair of eyes she trusted more than her own. They moved past families wrestling with suitcases, business travelers glued to phones, a toddler dragging a stuffed dinosaur by one leg. The air smelled like coffee, jet fuel, and nerves. Dana let the leash hang loose, watching Hudson's ears. He was calm, head level, tail at that easy working swing that meant all systems normal. Gate B12 buzzed ahead, boarding lines already forming like patient snakes. A pre-recorded voice crackled from the ceiling, calling a final boarding group. Near the rope line, a little girl in pink sneakers bounced on her toes, hugging a purple cat carrier to her chest. Her brown hair escaped in wisps from a crooked ponytail. Beside her, a man in a worn denim jacket checked his watch for the third time, shifting from foot to foot. Hudson passed them once, without a glance, eyes forward, breathing steady. Then he stopped. One paw froze mid-step. His head turned, slowly at first, then sharply, like a dial snapping to the correct frequency. Dana felt the shift pulse up through the leash, subtle at first, then unmistakable. His shoulders tightened. His ears cut forward. The low rumble started in his chest before she ever heard the first bark. She frowned, scanning the crowd, looking for the obvious threat she'd somehow missed. Hudson saw only one thing: the girl and the carrier. His gaze locked, pupils pinning, breath shallow. To anyone watching, nothing had changed yet, just a dog staring too long. But Dana knew his tells. "Hudson, heel," she murmured, a calm reminder, fingers tightening slightly. For half a heartbeat, he seemed to consider it. Then his body leaned forward, all at once, like gravity had shifted toward that purple carrier. The sudden pull nearly ripped the handle from Dana's hand. Hudson lunged, muscles firing, vest straining against his chest. His bark exploded, sharp and booming, drowning out the gentle airport murmur in a single blast. Conversation stopped mid-word. Heads snapped around. The girl jumped, clutching the carrier to her like a shield. The man in the denim jacket stumbled back, eyes wide with instant fear. "Hudson! Heel!" Dana planted her boots, shoulder snapping back from the force. He didn't even flick an ear at her command. The leash was a vibrating cable between them. He lunged again, not at the girl, but to get in front of her, blocking the rope line, chest wedged between her and the gate. Passengers gasped. A coffee cup hit the floor and rolled in a slow circle. Somewhere, a suitcase toppled with a hollow thud. The next bark was different, harsher, stretched with urgency. Hudson's teeth flashed as he snarled at the carrier, not the child, eyes locked on the plastic walls like something inside might explode at any second. The girl's lips trembled. "Make him stop," she cried, voice cracking into the shocked silence. "Please, I didn't do anything." She shrank behind the man's arm, the carrier shaking wildly in her hands. Phones appeared like magic, screens lifted, red dots blinking awake. "What's wrong with that dog?" someone muttered. "He's going after a kid." A toddler started wailing farther back in line. The man in the denim jacket threw his arm out in front of the girl. "Hey," he shouted at Dana, "get your dog under control. She's just trying to get on her plane." His voice carried more panic than anger. Logan Price, head of airport security, appeared from the nearby podium, drawn by the bark like a siren. Tall, stiff, and already irritated, he cut through the spectators with practiced authority. "What's happening here?" he barked, just as Hudson lunged again. The dog's claws scraped the floor, vest straps creaking as he strained, every line of his body screaming the same word in a language no one understood yet. Danger. Dana shifted her stance, bracing, feeling the pull twist through her shoulder and down her spine. She knew this dog. She'd trained with him in blind buildings, on hot pavement, in simulated chaos that never rattled him. He didn't lose it. He didn't spook. But this wasn't nerves. This was something primal, something that had climbed up from the base of his skull and taken command. "Back up!" Dana snapped to the crowd, eyes never leaving Hudson. "Everyone, step back now." For a second, nobody moved. The ring of onlookers just stared, caught between fear and fascination, between stepping away and getting a better shot for their feeds. Then Hudson barked again, a violent, echoing blast that hit the glass wall and bounced back. The sound broke something loose, and people finally shuffled backward, dragging bags and children with them, forming a ragged circle around the three of them. The girl's name was Lily, though no one had said it yet. It was written in loopy purple letters on a keychain dangling from the carrier handle. Her fingers were white around the plastic, knuckles pressed against the vent slits. Inside, something small shifted and meowed weakly, a frightened, muffled sound. Lily's eyes flooded. "It's just my cat," she sobbed. "He's scared. You're scaring him." She pressed the carrier tighter against her chest. Hudson's body quivered, a taut wire of instinct and training. He lowered his head a fraction, nose flaring, drawing in the air around the carrier like it held a map, only he could read. His snarl faded into a deep, vibrating growl. Dana heard the change and felt it too, the way the fight in the leash shifted from aggression to something closer to insistence. He backed a half step, not retreating, but angling his body to nudge Lily away from the gate, away from whatever he smelled. Logan's hand hovered near his radio. "We're not doing this in front of a boarding gate," he muttered. "Brooks, restrain that dog, or I will call it in." Dana didn't answer him. Her focus stayed glued to Hudson, to the tiny signals flickering through his posture. The set of his tail. The way his eyes never left the carrier. The faint whine that slipped between his teeth, almost lost under the rumble of his growl. The calm didn't come from the crowd or from Logan's hard stare. It came from the quiet realization settling like lead in Dana's gut. Hudson wasn't confused. He wasn't out of control. He was certain. He was choosing to disobey a direct command because something in that carrier had crossed his line in a way no human nose could track. The storm he'd kicked up around them was just noise. His world had narrowed to a frightened girl, a trembling cat, and a threat no one else could see. The girl's breathing hitched, small chest heaving under her jacket. For a fleeting moment, Hudson's gaze lifted from the carrier and met her eyes. Whatever he read there, it softened something in him. The bark died in his throat, leaving only that steady, rumbling warning. He stayed planted, unmovable, a living barricade between Lily and the boarding lane. The boarding announcement droned again overhead, almost absurdly cheerful, as if nothing at all had changed. But something had. In that tight circle of silence around a dog, a child, and a purple carrier, the routine morning at Sierra Valley International had quietly cracked. Nobody knew it yet, not Logan, not Evan, not the passengers clutching their phones. Only Hudson seemed to understand that this was the moment everything tilted. And until someone listened to what his furious barking was trying to say, he wasn't letting that little girl take one step closer to the plane. Oh, Logan's radio crackled at his shoulder, but he ignored it for the moment, eyes narrowed on the dog planted across the boarding lane. The rope barrier sagged where Hudson had shoved in front of Lily, chest broad, legs braced. His vest caught the gate light, the bold K9 lettering a sharp reminder this wasn't some pet acting up. This was a working dog refusing to move. Evan kept his arm slung in front of Lily like a human shield, but he couldn't hide the way his hand shook. "He's scaring her," he snapped, voice frayed at the edges. "It's just a cat. We cleared security already." Inside the carrier, the animal meowed again, high and thin. The sound made Lily flinch. Hudson's ears twitched, but his gaze never left the purple shell. Dana eased closer, careful not to crowd the dog. She could feel his tension from a step away, like heat off a live wire. His nostrils fluttered, drawing in the air around the carrier. Then he gave a low, grinding growl that wasn't aimed at anyone standing. It was aimed at whatever sat under those plastic vents. "Hudson," she said softly. "Talk to me, buddy. What is it?" Logan blew out a breath, already tired. "He's talking loud enough for the whole terminal," he muttered. Into his radio he barked, "Need a secondary at B12. Possible K9 alert." A couple of blue-shirted officers broke from a nearby checkpoint and headed over, hands resting on their belts, faces shifting from routine to wary as they took in the scene. Passengers had clustered in a loose ring, their voices dropping into that half-whisper people use when something might be dangerous, but no one wants to say the word. "He's trained, right?" a woman murmured. "So what's he smelling?" A teenager held his phone high, recording every second, the little red light blinking with quiet hunger. The normal airport buzz had stretched thin, ready to snap. Lily's cheeks were wet now, tears tracking through the faint dust of powdered sugar she'd missed wiping away earlier. "He doesn't like me," she whispered, more to the carrier than to anyone else. Hudson flicked a glance her way, just for a heartbeat, and something in his eyes gentled. He stepped sideways, just enough to block her with his whole body, pushing her back from the gate line without ever touching her. That small movement didn't look like much from where Logan stood, but Dana saw it clearly. He wasn't trying to reach the girl. He was trying to separate her from what she was holding. "Back the line up 5 feet," she ordered, voice firmer now. "Everyone take a step back." When no one moved fast enough, Hudson let out a clipped bark, and that did it. The crowd shuffled away, bumping bags, clearing a wider circle. One of the blue shirts, a younger officer with too much cologne, gestured toward the carrier. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to inspect that," he said to Lily. She shrank back, pressing the plastic against her chest. Evan tightened his grip on her shoulder. "You're not ripping it open in the middle of the terminal," he shot back. "It's a nervous cat, that's all." Hudson's growl deepened, a warning sinking under the boy's words. The officer reached anyway, fingers closing around the handle. The instant plastic shifted, Hudson exploded forward. Dana felt the surge a split second before it hit, wrenching her shoulder as the dog hit the end of the leash. "Easy." Jaws snapped shut in the air, an inch from the officer's wrist, not touching, but close enough for the message to land. The kid jerked his hand back like he'd grabbed a hot stove. "That's enough," Logan snapped. His patience was gone. "Brooks, that dog is out of line. Muzzle him, or I'll have him pulled from duty." Dana turned, eyes hard. "Hudson doesn't bluff," she said quietly. "If he wanted to bite, he'd have bitten. He's drawing a line. Respect it." The two of them stared each other down for a long beat while the dog stood between them, unmoving, the center of their silent argument. Lily's small voice trembled through the tension. "He's not mean," she whispered. He was nice when he walked by the first time." Her fingers found the keychain on the carrier, twisting the purple letters of her name. "He only got mad when they called our group." Dana filed that detail away. Hudson had walked past this carrier when the girl was just another face in the crowd. Something had changed. The overhead speakers chimed again, announcing a delay for another flight, but no one near B-12 listened. Dana stepped in front of Logan, putting herself in the narrow space between his authority and her dog's certainty. "We need to get that carrier to secondary screening," she said, calm but immovable. "Not in the open, not with half the terminal breathing down our necks. We do it by the book, and we do it now." Logan hesitated, eyes flicking from the frightened child to the vibrating leash. Every instinct told him this was a headache, not a crisis, another false alarm in a job full of them. But there was something about the way the dog stood there, every muscle held just shy of action, that got under his skin. "Fine," he ground out at last. "Secondary it is, but if this turns out to be cat food and panic, your dog's going offline." Dana didn't answer. She crouched beside Hudson instead, one hand resting on his vest. Up close, she could feel the tremor in his chest, not fear, but the energy of a runner held at the starting line. "We're going to take a walk, partner," she murmured. "You stay with that carrier. You don't let it out of your sight." His ears flicked back toward her voice, then forward again, locked on the plastic box. When she rose and nodded to the officers, Hudson fell in step, but not at her side. He chose his own place, glued to Lily and the carrier, head low, every breath dragging over the vents. The little procession moved off the main concourse toward the quieter security corridor, leaving behind a ring of murmurs and blinking phones. The airport's normal rhythm crept back in around the edges, but it felt thinner now, as if everyone sensed something had shifted. As they turned the corner past the last of the windows, the bright morning light slipped away, replaced by the cooler glow of utility fixtures humming overhead. The boarding lane noise faded into a distant buzz. In the narrower hallway, Hudson's presence felt even larger, his shadow stretching along the wall beside Lily's small one. Whatever he had smelled back there at Gate B-12, he hadn't changed his mind. He walked like a dog who knew he was taking them exactly where they needed to go, whether any human understood it yet or not. The secondary screening room sat just off the main corridor, quieter, the sounds of the terminal pushed behind thick walls. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing everything in a flat, pale glow. Hudson stepped through the doorway first, nails clicking on the tile, nose already sweeping the air like a slow searchlight. The room smelled of rubber trays, metal, and old coffee. A conveyor belt and X-ray tunnel stretched along one wall, its monitor resting on an arm like a watching eye. A blue curtain screened off a search table. One officer stood by the console, bored until a moment ago, his posture straightening as the group filed in. Lily hovered just inside the doorway, clutching the purple carrier to her chest like a life jacket. Hudson circled once, pacing a slow half-moon between Lily and the machine. His nostrils fluttered every time he passed the carrier, a faint whine sitting in his throat. He didn't lunge now. The panic of the gate had cooled into something harder, more focused, like a storm that had chosen its path. Dana felt the difference through the leash, a smaller vibration but deeper. "Set it on the belt, sweetheart," Dana said gently. Her voice softened when she turned to Lily, though her eyes stayed sharp. "We're just going to take a picture of it, all right? Mochi will be fine." Lily's fingers didn't move at first. Then, bit by bit, she let the carrier slide from her arms into Dana's waiting hands, lips pressing together to stop the quiver. The X-ray officer, a stocky man with tired eyes, took the carrier and set it on the belt. Hudson followed right alongside, head low, muscles tight under the vest. When the rubber belt started moving, the soft whir echoed in the small room. Hudson's ears flicked back at the sound, then forward again, his gaze tracking the carrier until it disappeared into the tunnel. On the monitor, the usual gray and black shapes shimmered into view. For a second, it looked harmless enough. A rough outline of an animal, the curve of a plastic bowl, a few indistinct lumps. Then, as the carrier rolled to the center of the screen, the officer leaned forward. His hand froze on the control panel. Sharp, straight lines appeared beneath the soft shapes, bright and unnatural. "Hold it," he muttered, hitting the pause and roll back. The image slid a fraction, then stopped. Dana stepped closer, every sense narrowing. Hudson moved with her, chest pressed to her leg, eyes flicking between the screen and the tunnel opening. Under the image of the cat, a darker rectangle glowed, packed with small uniform capsules and what looked like a thin metal grid. "That's not standard hardware," the officer said quietly. Logan came up on his other side, eyes narrowing. "Could be reinforcement in the base," he offered, but his tone didn't match the words. The grid wasn't where reinforcement should be. It sat higher, floating like a hidden shelf, with rows of tiny cylinders tucked beneath it, like seeds in a pod. Hudson's growl started so low it was more vibration than sound. His nose pointed straight at the machine, then dipped toward the belt as the carrier emerged. The fur along his spine lifted in a silent ridge. Dana saw it, and her mouth went dry. This was the same posture she'd seen on bomb drills, on live calls where the world might hinge on a single wrong guess. The officer reached to lift the carrier, but Hudson stepped in, blocking him with his shoulder, a quiet, solid wall of dog. He didn't snap this time. He didn't need to. His body said everything. Dana laid a hand on his back. "Easy," she breathed, though she wasn't sure if she meant it for him or for herself. "We're listening, boy. We see it." Behind them, Lily shifted her weight from foot to foot, hands twisted in the hem of her jacket. "It's just his carrier," she whispered. Mochi's carrier was blue before, but the cat lady said this one was warmer. Logan half-turned. "What cat lady?" he asked, the question cutting through the air like a sudden draft. Lily blinked, surprised anyone was asking her. "In the big waiting area," she said, voice small. "When Uncle Evan went to get us muffins. She had a blue jacket and a badge. She said airports are cold for pets and gave him this new house." She nodded toward the carrier, eyes shining. "She petted Mochi and said I was a good helper. She told me not to worry about anything else." Hudson's head snapped toward her at the word badge, ears pricked. He stared for a second, then swung back to the carrier, nostrils flaring harder, as if he were trying to pull that woman's scent out of whatever clung to the plastic and metal. There it was again, that thin thread tying things together that only he could feel. To everyone else, they were just disconnected details. Dana met Logan's eyes over the top of Hudson's head. In that look was every call they'd answered where someone said, "It's probably nothing," right before it turned into something they never forgot. "We open it," she said quietly. "Carefully, cameras rolling, gloves on, and we don't dismiss anything this dog is still telling us." Her hand scratched once between Hudson's shoulders, grounding both of them. They moved like a small, tense choreography. Gloves snapped on. A portable camera was pulled from a drawer. The carrier was set on a stainless steel table under a brighter light. The cat inside huddled into the back corner, eyes wide, tail puffed. Hudson stood at the table's edge, chin almost level with the handle, his breath fogging the plastic, for a moment before clearing again. When the latches clicked and the top lifted, Hudson stiffened, but he didn't lunge. He watched. First came the cat, lifted gently out by a tech and transferred to a spare crate. Then came the blanket, the collapsible bowl, a toy mouse with a bell in its belly. Underneath, the molded plastic floor looked ordinary. It would have fooled anyone who didn't live their life dissecting containers. The officer tapped the base. It made a dull, wrong sound. Too thick. He ran his fingers along the edge and found a seam that shouldn't be there, a faint line nearly invisible. "There," Dana said under her breath. The officer slid a narrow tool into the gap and pried. The false bottom gave with a soft crack, lifting to reveal the hidden space beneath. A faint chemical tang hit the air. Hudson bared his teeth, a low snarl curling up from his chest as he stared into the freshly exposed hollow. Charcmbe. The hollow space under the carrier floor was no bigger than a shoebox, but it might as well have been a vault. Inside lay a row of tiny plastic capsules, each the size of a fingertip, nestled beside a thin strip of wired metal. The smell that rose up was faint but sharp, a chemical tang that made the back of Dana's throat sting. Hudson growled, the sound low and steady. Gloved hands lifted one capsule into the light, turning it between rubber fingers. It looked harmless, like a vitamin from a pill organizer, but X-ray didn't lie. Logan's jaw tightened as he watched. "That's not pet supplies," he said quietly. The tech set it on a tray, snapping pictures. Hudson's eyes followed every movement, as if those tiny pieces were alive. They didn't keep Lily in the screening room to see it. She was led down the hallway to a small interview space, with Evan close behind and Hudson pacing at their heels. The room was softer than the search bay, lit by a single overhead fixture and a narrow window. 2 chairs sat on one side of the table, a third on the other. Hudson settled on the floor between Lily and the door, as if he'd chosen his post. Evan sat stiffly, hands clasped so tight his knuckles blanched. Lily's feet dangled above the tile, sneakers not quite touching the floor. She kept glancing at Hudson like she wasn't sure if he was friend or judge. The dog didn't look at her. He stared at Evan, ears angled forward, chest rising and falling in slow, controlled breaths. Logan took the chair opposite them, a notepad on the table he probably didn't need. Dana stood along the wall, one hand resting lightly on Hudson's harness. "Let's start simple," Logan said, voice measured. "Tell me again why you're traveling with your niece today." Evan forced a smile that never made it to his eyes. "Her mom's having a hard time. I'm just taking Lily to stay with me in California for a while." The growl rolled out of Hudson almost lazily, a rumble that vibrated against Dana's fingertips. He didn't bare his teeth. He didn't lunge. He simply let the sound exist in the space between Evan's words and the truth. Lily flinched and looked down. Logan's gaze flicked to the dog, then back to the man. "Her mother know you're here?" he asked. "Of course she does," Evan said too fast. "We planned it. She just couldn't afford the ticket." His knee bounced under the table, a nervous jig he seemed unaware of. Hudson's eyes narrowed, tracking the movement, then shifting to the man's hands when they twisted together. To the dog, stress had a scent, sharp and sour over the soap. Dana spoke up, her tone calm. "Lily," she said gently, "you mentioned a lady in a blue jacket gave you the new carrier. Can you tell us more about her?" The little girl lifted her head slowly. Hudson's ears twitched at the question, his attention swiveling, though his body stayed anchored in place. The room seemed to lean in with him. "She was nice," Lily said, voice small. "She smelled like flowers. She had a badge on a string right here." Lily tapped her chest. "She said she worked here and that my kitty looked cold. She told me I was doing a good job helping Uncle Evan. She said not to bother him with pet stuff because grown-ups worry too much." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Was that bad?" Hudson whined softly, a thin thread of sound that tugged at the edges of the room. He shifted closer to her chair, his flank brushing her shoe. Dana felt the change in him, the way his focus softened around the child while sharpening toward the story. There was a pattern forming he could feel long before the humans could name it. A knock sounded at the door, light but quick. Logan opened it to find a woman in an airport badge lanyard and a dark cardigan, a tablet tucked under her arm. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot, wisps escaping around her face. "You called for camera pull?" she asked. I'm Maya Ortiz, security tech. Her eyes dropped to Hudson and her brows rose a fraction. And I'm guessing that's the reason why. Maya set the tablet on the table, fingers dancing across the screen. I scrubbed the feeds from the concourse near B12, she said. Grainy video appeared, people milling around, boarding lines, kids with backpacks. She dragged the timeline to a recent mark. Here, that's your niece and the original blue carrier. The image showed Lily on a bench, swinging her feet while Evan walked away. They watched as a woman in a blue jacket stepped into the frame, face turned just enough to avoid a clear shot. A badge glinted at her chest. She sat beside Lily, hands moving in a friendly, practiced rhythm. A moment later, the purple carrier appeared where the blue one had been. Maya froze the frame. She's not one of ours, Maya said. Badge number doesn't exist in the employee system. Hudson's nose lifted toward the screen as if he could smell the pixels. His tail stilled. The faint wag. He'd shown Lily gone. For him, the woman on the display wasn't an image. She was the echo of the scent that clung to the carrier, the same thread of danger that had driven him to block the gate. He exhaled once, a short huff, then fixed his eyes back on Evan. Evan stared at the tablet a little too long. I didn't see her, he muttered. I was just getting breakfast. I trusted the people here knew what they were doing. Logan leaned forward. How did you end up with Lily in the first place? He asked. You said her mother sent her to you? Did you pick her up at her house? At school? Where? The question hung there, heavier than it sounded. Evan swallowed. A friend brought her, he said finally. A woman my sister knows. She met us in the parking lot 2 days ago. She said my sister had to work late. His story wobbled around the edges. Hudson's lip twitched, showing the barest flash of tooth before smoothing out again. His body didn't buy what his ears were hearing. Silence settled over the room for a slow count. Outside the door, a cart rattled past and faded. Inside, the only steady sound was Hudson's breathing and the faint tap of Lily's shoe against his side. She had dropped one hand to his fur without looking, fingers curling into the thick ruff at his neck. He didn't shake her off. He leaned into it, just enough to steady her. Maya broke the quiet first. There's something else, she said, sliding to another clip. Same woman in the blue jacket, different camera, 10 minutes earlier. She walks behind a family with 2 small boys, then peels off when the crowd shifts. Her eyes aren't on the planes, they're on the kids. She glanced at Logan. This isn't random kindness, she's shopping. Logan's face hardened, the weight of it settling into his shoulders. The story was changing shape in front of him from one strange dog alert to something colder. All right, he said, voice low. This is bigger than a nervous cat. We treat it that way. His gaze dropped to Hudson, the dog still lying rigid between child and door. Looks like you were first one to catch it, partner. Dana sank to one knee beside her canine, fingers easing into the fur at his chest. Up close, she could see the bright focus in his eyes, the way his muscles stayed coiled even while he lay still. You did good, she whispered, more to him than anyone else. You drew the line where we couldn't see it. He blinked slowly, then let his head tip the smallest bit into her hand. The tension in the room didn't disappear, but it shifted. The panic from the gate had melted into a colder, clearer resolve. They would make calls. They would pull more footage. They would dig into names and travel records and every loose thread the woman in the blue jacket had left behind. For the moment, though, in this small space, the job was simpler. Hudson stayed exactly where he'd put himself, a living wall between Lily and any doorway that might carry the wrong person through it. The little girl's breathing eased, matching his rhythm. Whatever came next, he was ready to move when the humans finally caught up to what his nose and instincts had known from the first bark at Gate B12. This wasn't just about one flight. It was about making sure she never got on the wrong one. On a stainless steel tray in the evidence room, the capsules looked even smaller, scattered like pale seeds under harsh light. Each one had a tiny seam and a sliver of metal inside, too uniform to be accidental. Hudson lay at Dana's feet, but his eyes never left the tray. His head followed every slow movement, nose lifting each time the chemical scent shifted. A hazmat tech leaned in with a handheld scanner, the device clicking softly as it passed over the plastic. Numbers flashed green, then yellow. "Not explosive," he said, brow furrowing. "At least not by anything on my chart." He tapped the metal strip. "But someone went to a lot of trouble to hide these. They're not toys." Hudson huffed, as if that part was obvious. The door swung open with a soft hiss, and a new voice broke the sterile quiet. "Which usually means they're worse than explosives." A man in a dark suit stepped in, badge hanging from his belt, tie slightly loosened like he'd been in transit for hours. He nodded once at Logan. "Cole Harris, Federal Task Force." His gaze slid to Hudson. "And I'm guessing he's the reason my phone rang." Cole set a slim folder on the table, but didn't open it yet. He walked closer to the tray, eyes narrowing. "You said they came out of a pet carrier?" Logan nodded. "False bottom. Kid thought she was just bringing her cat." Cole exhaled through his nose, something between a sigh and a curse. "They're getting bolder," he murmured. "Or more desperate." Hudson shifted his weight forward, paws inching closer to the table legs. The smell of latex gloves, metal, and that thin bite of chemical all twisted together in his nose. It wasn't just one scent now. Underneath it, faint but steady, was the same floral trace from the concourse, the ghost of the woman in blue. His muscles tensed, tail stiffening into a straight line. Cole finally flipped open the folder. Newspaper clippings, printouts, grainy photos slid into view. Missing children, blurred surveillance stills of different airports, all annotated in careful pen strokes. "We've seen these capsules before," he said. "Different containers, different states. They're trackers, microbeacons tied to encrypted IDs. The kids they're attached to don't always make it where their families think they're going." Dana felt Hudson's body go even stiller at the change in her own breathing. Her hand went to his neck, fingers sinking into the warm fur. "You're telling me she was marked?" she asked quietly. "The little girl out there?" Cole didn't answer right. Away. He glanced at Maya, who had come in behind him with her tablet tucked close. "Run the serial patterns," he told her. "Let's see how many kids this carrier was meant to touch." Maya's fingers flicked across the screen, eyes darting between code and photos. "These aren't random," she said after a moment. "Each chip carries a segment of a larger data string, like they're splitting a list up and hiding it piece by piece. Names, maybe, or accounts." She looked up, face pale. "Either way, you move the child and the data together. No one searches a cat carrier." Hudson's ears pricked at her tone. He rose to his feet without a command, nails ticking on the floor. His nose traced the air, from the tray to the open door, then back again. The bad smell wasn't locked in the room. It trailed out into the hallway, thin but unbroken. He let out a quiet whine, glancing up at Dana, then toward the corridor like a dog who'd just heard a distant call. Cole noticed. "He does that a lot?" he asked. "Act like he's hearing a song the rest of us can't?" Dana managed a tight half-smile. "Only when it matters." She followed Hudson's gaze to the doorway. The fluorescent hum outside blended with the softer sounds of the terminal beyond. Carts rolling, voices muted by distance. Whatever had started at Gate B12 hadn't ended at that carrier. Logan rubbed a hand across his jaw. Fatigue and frustration etched deep. "So we're not just looking at one kid and one fake employee," he said. "We're looking at a route." Cole nodded once. "A supply line," he corrected, "and your dog just put his paw on it." He closed the folder with a decisive snap. "We locked down every animal container and oversized bag cleared in her time window. No exceptions." Dana felt the shift, the way the room's purpose sharpened. This wasn't about explaining a barking dog anymore. It was about catching up to the trouble he'd already found. Hudson stepped to the doorway, muscles coiled, but patient, like a runner waiting for the gun. His nose hovered just above the floor, tasting a trail that seemed invisible to everyone else. For a moment, no one moved. They stood there with their charts and files and screens, men and women trained to see patterns in data and paper. The only one looking at the ground was the dog. Hudson flicked a glance back at Dana, then took a deliberate step into the hall, leash tightening. The message was simple. Whatever they were afraid of wasn't all in the past tense. "All right, partner," Dana said softly, letting the line play out between her fingers. "Show us what else they thought we wouldn't notice." Hudson's tail gave one firm beat, not joy, but confirmation. Then he followed the invisible thread of scent out into the corridor, leaving the tray of capsules and the bright humming room behind, already chasing the next piece of a danger only he could smell from here. Andu, the service corridor hummed with a different kind of noise than the main terminal. Out here, the sounds were deeper. A distant compressor, the clank of metal, the low rumble of a tug somewhere beyond the wall. Hudson padded ahead of the group, nose skimming the concrete, tail a straight line. The floral trace and sharp chemical bite braided together in front of him like a rope. They followed him down a gradual ramp, away from carpet and bright glass, into the belly of the airport. The air cooled and thickened with the smell of rubber tires, oil, and jet exhaust sneaking in through weather seals. Dana let the leash run longer between them, trusting his path. Logan and Cole came behind, radios murmuring in short, clipped bursts as they called for ground access. A side door with a faded exit sign stood propped open with a crate. Through it, the space widened into the baggage and maintenance area. Rows of carts, tugs, and metal containers lined up like low, rumbling buildings. Workers in orange vests paused, watching the sudden parade of uniforms and the lean K-9 cutting through their world with purpose. Hudson's head lifted, nostrils flaring as a breeze drifted in from the far end, carrying with it the scent he'd been chasing since the concourse. Not just flowers and metal now, but sweat and adrenaline, fresh and sharp. His ears snapped forward. Without waiting for a word, he veered hard to the left, leash pulling Dana toward a cluster of luggage carts parked near Gate 14's service lane. Between two stacks of cases, a flicker of motion caught his eye. A blue jacket, dark hair pulled under a cap, a flash of a badge lanyard swinging. The woman turned at the sound of boots, eyes wide just for a heartbeat. Hudson recognized her before anyone else did. She smelled like the carrier, like the capsules, like Lily's fear folded into a human shape. She bolted, cutting between carts, knocking a clipboard to the ground as she ran. "Stop! Airport security!" Logan shouted, his voice swallowed by the open space. Hudson didn't wait for permission. He surged forward, paws scrambling briefly on polished concrete before finding purchase, then stretched into a full, ground-eating run. The woman reached a heavy fire door at the far end and shoved it open, alarms shrieking as red lights blinked to life. As she slipped through, something small and dark clattered from her hand onto the floor, rolling in a crooked circle. A second later, it hissed, vomiting a thick gray cloud that boiled up and spread, swallowing the narrow hall beyond in smoke. Human eyes watered instantly. Logan and Cole coughed, covering their mouths, slowed by the sting in their throats and the sudden wall of fog. Dana squinted, blinking hard. Shapes blurred into vague outlines. In the middle of it, Hudson didn't lift a paw off the gas. The smoke stung his nose, but the trail inside it only sharpened, stripped of almost everything but her. Sound took over where sight failed. The echo of running. Footsteps on concrete, the scrape of a crate brushed too close, the sharp hitch in a stranger's breath. Hudson's world narrowed to those signals and the hot, insistent ribbon of scent leading him forward. He bent his body into the turns, tail cutting the air for balance as he zigzagged through shapes he couldn't see. Then she was there, close, a moving knot of fear and bad intent wrapped in a cleaner's uniform. Hudson didn't think about it. He launched, jaws snapping shut around the thick fabric of her sleeve, his weight slamming into her legs. Momentum took them both into the side of a metal container with a hollow boom. Her cry was swallowed by the alarm and the hiss of fading smoke. She swung at him in reflex, knuckles cracking against the hard bone of his skull. He shifted his grip, not to flesh, but to firmer fabric, anchoring himself. "Hudson, hold!" Dana's voice cut through the noise like a clean line. He obeyed the word the way he disobeyed heel at the gate, with complete commitment. He didn't tear. He pinned, pulling her off balance and keeping her there. By the time Logan and Cole reached them, coughing and squinting, the woman was half on her knees, one arm twisted awkwardly, the other still trapped in Hudson's grip. Her chest heaved. The cap had fallen, dark hair spilling out. Cole grabbed her free wrist, snapping cuffs around it in a practiced, final motion. "You're done running," he said, breath short but certain. At Dana's second command, "Out," Hudson released, backing up just enough to let the officers take over. His tongue lolled slightly, sides heaving, but his eyes never left her face. She stared back at him, something between hatred and respect flickering in her gaze. "Smart dog," she murmured bitterly. Too smart for his own good. Hudson answered with a soft growl that said he'd take that as a compliment. The alarm finally cut, leaving a muffled ringing in the air. The smoke thinned, revealing more of the corridor. Dented crates, scattered luggage tags, a knocked-over cone. Workers peered from safe distances, whispers already starting. Dana stepped to Hudson's side, fingers slipping under his collar to feel the fast, strong beat of his heart. "Good boy," she breathed. "You found her. You did exactly what you were built to do." As they led the woman back through the maintenance area, flanked by officers, Hudson walked a half step ahead, head held level. The breeze from the open cargo doors brought in cool air and the distant roar of a taxiing plane. The bad scent was still there, but weaker now, tucked inside the cuffs and steel around her wrists instead of moving free through the crowd. When they reached the ramp that led back toward the inner corridors, Hudson paused, glancing up toward the direction of the terminal. Somewhere beyond that maze of halls and checkpoints, a little girl was sitting in a small room, hands probably still trembling, a cat curled in a borrowed crate. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. He only knew one simple thing his body understood better than any report. He had stopped the path that would have taken her closer to danger and farther from safety. With the woman in custody and the sense beginning to clear, Hudson's tail gave a single, quiet sweep. Then he turned with Dana back toward the bright, humming heart of the airport, ready to finish the job his first furious bark had started at Gate B-12. The interrogation room felt smaller with the woman inside it. The walls were the same pale gray, the table the same scuffed metal. But the air had a different weight. Hudson lay near the door, front paws stretched out, head up. To anyone else he looked relaxed. Dana, leaning against the wall, could see the tension riding high in his shoulders. The woman's blue jacket was gone, traded for a standard gray holding shirt. Her hair hung loose now, still neat even after the chase. Cuffs rested on the table between her hands, chain whispering each time she shifted. She kept her eyes on Cole, who sat across from her with a file open, his voice calm and even, the way people talk right before they press a point. "Your badge was fake," Cole said. "Your employee number doesn't exist, but your face shows up near 3 different families in that concourse alone." He slid a grainy photo toward her. "You want to tell me you were just being friendly?" She smiled, a small, tired curve of her mouth. "People get nervous in airports," she said. "I like helping." Hudson's ears twitched at the sound of her voice. There was no warmth in it, no real fear either, just a measured coolness. He watched every tiny movement, every breath. When she spoke again, shrugging lightly. The dog overreacted. The growl rolled out of him before he could swallow it, a low, steady warning that settled under the table like distant thunder. Cole glanced down at him, then back at her. "That dog has saved more lives than you've ever met," he said quietly. "He doesn't overreact. He alerts." He tapped the file. "Those capsules in the carrier? We've seen them in Atlanta, Denver, Phoenix. They always show up right before a child disappears on a flight they were never supposed to take." The woman's fingers clenched, chains clinking. For a heartbeat, something like regret flickered behind her eyes, then vanished. "You think you stopped something big today?" she murmured. "You stopped one carrier, one child?" Her gaze slid toward Hudson. "You can't smell all of them." The words were quiet, but they landed like a slap. The door opened before Cole could answer. Maya slipped in, tablet in hand, her face a few shades paler than before. "We finished cross-checking the chip patterns," she said, voice a little tight. "They're not just trackers. Each one carries a fragment of an encrypted passenger list. Kids flying alone, kids with one-way tickets, kids with temporary guardians, on record." Hudson shifted his weight, picking up on the rise in her tone. Maya glanced at the woman. 3 other pet crates and 2 family suitcases cleared in the same window as Lily's carrier, she said. "Same shipping code buried in the tags. One's already in holding for a flight to Dallas, another's staged for Chicago." She swallowed. They were building a route right through us. For the first time, the woman's composure cracked. Her shoulders sagged just a fraction. "You don't know who you're poking at," she whispered. "I'm not the one making the lists. I just move what they hand me. If I talk, they'll have a replacement in a week. That's how this works." Her eyes flicked to Hudson again, as if measuring him. "He's the only reason I lost this one." Hudson stared back, unblinking. He didn't understand her words, but he understood the shift in her scent, fear climbing over the old cold confidence. He rose slowly to his feet, nails soft on the floor, tail held level. His body angled, ever so slightly, toward the door that led back to the terminal. Something in him tugged that way, like a rope pulling taut. Maya hesitated, then added one more piece. "There's something else," she said. "When I ran Lily's full name through the National Registry, a flag popped. She was reported missing 2 days ago, not from this state, from 3 states over." Logan stiffened by the wall. Dana felt the floor tilt just a little. Hudson's head snapped toward Maya's voice, ears sharp, eyes bright. The room went quiet. Even the air conditioner hum seemed softer for a moment. Evan, sitting outside in a plastic chair, didn't know yet. Lily, in a small waiting room down the hall, certainly didn't. But Hudson's world snapped that fact into place instantly. The child he'd blocked at the gate hadn't just been in the wrong line. She'd already been taken from wherever she was supposed to be. Cole closed the file slowly. "So here's how I see it," he said, eyes locked on the woman. "You used this airport like a bus stop on someone else's route. You hid chips under animals, under toys, under whatever people wouldn't question. And you counted on the fact that most days everybody's in a rush." He nodded toward Hudson. "Today just wasn't your day." He stood, chair scraping softly. "Logan, get teams on those other crates and bags. Ground those flights if you have to. We're not letting a single tagged piece of luggage leave this place until we know what's inside it." Logan gave a short nod and stepped out, already barking orders into his radio. The woman watched him go, then looked back at the dog by the door. Hudson was already moving before Dana could shorten the leash. He stepped backward into the hallway, nose lifting, taking in fresh streams of air. The flower-sweet trail and sharp chemical bite fanned out into thinner threads now, leading toward other gates, other staging areas. He turned his head once, checking for Dana, then set his paws in the direction he needed to go. Out on the baggage level, carts sat loaded and waiting, each with its own cluster of crates and suitcases, anonymous and ordinary to human eyes. To Hudson, they were not the same. The wrong smell clung to some of them, faint but present. He trotted alongside the first line, pausing only once. His body went still. Then came two short barks, crisp and clear, his trained alert cutting through the clatter around him. Technicians moved in, gloves snapping, locks popping. Another false-bottom pet crate, another hidden strip of capsules and wires. Farther down, he stopped at a sturdy family suitcase with cartoon stickers on the side, paw pressing once against the fabric. Inside, beneath folded clothes, lay the same quiet, humming threat. Each find tightened the knot in Dana's chest, but eased something else inside her. They were catching up. By the time they circled back toward the inner hallway, Hudson's tongue hung slightly, breath deeper, but his eyes were still scanning. They passed the small room where Lily waited. Through the narrow window, he could see her perched on a chair, cat carrier at her feet, tiny hands twisted in her jacket hem. Her gaze drifted toward the door just as he paused outside it. For a second, dog and child simply looked at each other through the glass. Lily's shoulders dropped, a small breath leaving her like she'd been holding it for hours. Her fingers slid off the fabric and came to rest on the carrier handle instead. Hudson's ears softened, tail giving one slow, reassuring sweep. He stepped a little closer to the door, close enough that his presence was more than a shadow. Dana let him stand there a moment longer before touching his neck. "She's still here because of you," she murmured. "And those other kids might get another chance now, too." Hudson didn't know the numbers, the names, the cities scrolling across Maya's tablet. He knew only the simple truth his body understood from the start. Something had been wrong, and he hadn't let a small girl walk past him toward it. When he finally turned away from the window, the hall felt different. There was still work to do, still questions without answers. But the worst path had been blocked, at least for today. Hudson walked on beside Dana, gait steady, breathing easing back into a calmer rhythm. The echo of his own furious barking at the gate seemed far away now, but its meaning had only grown clearer with every step he'd taken since. The hallway outside the interview rooms had quieted by the time the sun began slipping behind the terminal's glass wall. The earlier alarms and rushing footsteps had faded into a low, steady hum. Hudson lay near Dana's feet, his body finally still, though his ears twitched now and then, picking up the faint shuffle of carts or a distant boarding call. He had spent hours tracking danger through the airport, and now the building itself seemed to settle around him. Down the corridor, Lily sat bundled in a blanket on a bench, Mochi curled in her lap. The little girl's eyes were red from crying, but she wasn't trembling anymore. Every so often, she glanced toward the corner where Hudson rested, and the dog would flick his gaze back, just long enough to let her know he saw her. That tiny exchange carried more reassurance than any words the adults had offered her all day. Cole stepped out of the last interview room, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Transport's taking her," he said quietly to Logan and Dana. "She's not the top of their chain, but she's enough to start pulling threads." Logan nodded, looking older under the hallway lights. "She wouldn't have been caught if not for him. He tipped his chin toward Hudson. Dog saved us days of guesswork. Dana crouched beside her K9 partner, hand brushing his shoulder. Up close, she could see the exhaustion hiding under his steady posture, the way his breaths came deep and slow. He wasn't wired tight anymore. He had done what he needed to do, made himself loud when the humans were too quiet. Now he just watched, patient, waiting to see if his job was finally done. A voice echoed from the far end of the hall, soft, trembling, and desperate. "Lily?" Everyone turned as a woman hurried through security, hair unkempt, coat half-zipped, eyes wide with fear. She stumbled more than walked, scanning the hallway until she saw the little girl on the bench. Lily shot up, carrier swinging at her side, and bolted toward her mother with a cry that hit every heart in the room. The woman dropped to her knees just in time to catch her. Arms wrapped so tight it looked like she might never let go again. She kept whispering, "I've got you, I've got you," over and over, rocking her daughter as if trying to erase the last 2 days from both their bodies. The sound carried down the hall, soft and raw, and even Hudson lifted his head, watching the reunion with quiet, careful eyes. Cole stepped back to give them space. "Her real ID checked out," he murmured. "She reported Lily missing the same morning she disappeared. No record of the uncle ever showing up at the school." Dana exhaled slowly. Somewhere in her chest, tension she hadn't fully acknowledged finally eased, like a knot pulled loose. Hudson must have felt it too. He pushed up to his feet, stretching before padding a few steps closer to the mother and child. Lily noticed him first. She pulled back from her mother and pointed with a teary smile. "That's him," she said, voice wobbling. "The one who didn't let me go." Her mother looked up at the dog, eyes shining with gratitude, heavy enough to break anyone open. "He saved her," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "He saved my baby." Hudson sat a respectful distance away, tail making one slow sweep across the tile. He didn't move closer until Lily stepped toward him, small hand reaching out. When her fingers touched his fur, he leaned in gently, lowering his head so she could hug his neck. The moment was quiet, almost fragile, like the air around them understood it needed to hold still. Logan cleared his throat, trying to sound gruff, but failing. "Looks like he made a friend," he muttered. Dana smiled a little. "He tends to leave an impression." Cole glanced between them, shaking his head lightly. "If this story ever gets written up, people will swear it's exaggerated." He paused. "But we all saw it. That dog knew before we did." As the terminal lights shifted toward evening mode, an announcement rolled overhead, signaling normal operations resuming. Flights cleared. Gates reopened. People moved again. But the hallway felt removed from all that, quieter somehow, like a separate world carved out just for the end of a long, unstable day. Lily's mother gathered her daughter and the cat carrier, whispering thanks to every officer within reach. When she reached Dana and Hudson, she stopped, bending slightly to meet the dog's eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "You brought her back to me." Hudson blinked once, then pressed his nose lightly to the hem of her coat, a gesture gentler than anything his training manual ever mentioned. They walked away slowly, mother holding daughter's hand like she'd never release it again. Hudson watched until they rounded the corner. Only then did he sit back on his haunches, chest lifting with a long, steady breath, as if settling into the certainty that the danger he'd sensed was finally behind them. Dana knelt beside him again, brushing a hand along his cheek. "You did it, partner," she murmured. "You did everything right." Hudson leaned into her palm, eyes soft, the long day reflected in their steady calm. Outside the terminal windows, the sky had slipped into twilight, streaked with gold and fading blue. The airport lights blinked awake one by one. As they headed back toward the K-9 unit exit, Hudson walked close to her side, his stride easy now, no tight pull in the leash, no growl riding under his breath. Just the measured, confident steps of a dog who had followed his instincts and been proven right. His furious barking had stopped a tragedy that no one else saw coming. And as the last boarding call drifted across the quiet terminal, it finally made sense to everyone who had witnessed it. He hadn't been warning them about a child. He had been warning them for her. A single dog refusing to let one little girl board a plane had changed the course of an entire day, and maybe many days to come. Bum. If you made it this far, tell me this. Did Hudson make the right call? Drop a 0 if you think yes, or a 1 if you think he sensed even more than we realized. It's simple, takes 1 second, and I honestly love seeing how you all think. And if you want more true heart stories like this one, where instinct, courage, and a little luck change everything, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. There's a new story coming, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's next.